Taiwan Semiconductor, largest and most sophisticated semiconductor producer in the world by far. They've got the best chips and they're huge. They've announced $40 billion to build 4 new semiconductor fabrication plants, so-called fabs, in the Phoenix area. Well, wait a second. They can build them in Taiwan. They could probably build them in China or Vietnam. Why are they building them in Phoenix? The answer is that there's a danger, and probably a growing danger, that China might invade Taiwan. And the U.S. military has a doctrine we call it the broken nest theory. And it's based on a Chinese proverb, ironically. And the proverb is, if the nest is broken, how can the eggs survive? So TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor, know that if China invades, we know that if China invades Taiwan, the U.S. military is going to destroy Taiwan Semiconductor physically, whether you burn it to the ground, bomb it, whatever it takes, destroy it, because we don't want it to fall into Chinese hands. Taiwan Semiconductor know that. So they're like, okay, well, we want to survive as a company. We'll build in Arizona. So on the one hand, it's a defensive play, so the company survives if there's an invasion by China. But on the other hand, it's a really good example of onshoring. And by the way, what are you doing? You're reducing those supply chains. Remember I said they were 9,000 miles long from Chongqing to New York or Shanghai to Amsterdam? Well, now you're compressing them. It will probably increase costs in some ways in the short run, maybe reduce margins to some extent. But I describe it as like buying insurance. You have insurance, I have insurance. Nobody wants their house to burn down, but if something happens, you're glad you have the insurance. And when you pay that insurance bill, when you write a check or pay it online or whatever, you don't think you're wasting your money. You're incurring a cost, but you say it's money well spent because I'm getting insurance against this catastrophic outcome. It's the same thing with supply chains. Maybe skilled labor in Phoenix is a little more expensive than skilled labor in Taiwan. Maybe not, by the way. That's an interesting question. Janet Yellen calls this friendshoring. We're going to, bring our trading relationships to friendly countries. Emmanuel Macron has called it constellation of nations. He has a vision for a new EU that would be, I guess, side by side, but different rules, maybe get the UK involved or whatever. I refer to it in my book as the College of Nations. But basically the idea is, we'll still have supply chain, we'll have some outsourcing, we'll have trade, but it will be like a club. And to be in the club, you're going to have to be kind of a democratic, liberal, in the political sense, society with a good rule of law. That's an important part of it, that respects human rights. And that would be, the United States and Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Western Europe, probably India. People think it's this emerging market. Well, it is, but it's the largest democracy in the world, 1.4 billion people. So they'll be in the club and they'll trade with each other. But China will not be in the club because of, genocide and killing baby girls, 20 million baby girls, and ethnic cleansing and concentration camps and torture and a lot else. They'll be out of the club. They can form their own group and they may team up with ASEAN members, South Asian members, Central Asian republics, Russia, and others. But this will be probably more than a bipolar world, maybe a multipolar world of clubs who trade with each other inside the club, but not with members outside the club. And that would be kind of a little bit more the way it was in the Cold War. I remember, I think it was late 1960s, maybe early 1970s, Pepsi-Cola announced they were building a bottling plant near Moscow. You would have thought that world peace had broken out. It was like, unbelievable. You get a Pepsi in Moscow. It was one bottling plant. It wasn't more than that. But that's how restricted trade was at the time. And Russia, traded, but they were pretty much just producing oil and, some basic commodity exports. But the world may be going back to a place like that because of, first of all, the need to build more robust, resilient supply chains, and also because for a variety of ideological and geopolitical reasons. The conventional wisdom is the 20th century was the American century. The 21st century is going to be the Chinese century or the Asian century, and they're going to blow past the United States in a matter of years in terms of being the world's largest economy, higher GDP, technology coming on stream, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, stronger military. They'll be at worst Western Pacific hegemon, if not a global hegemon, and it's all China and they're going to rule the world. Everything I just said is wrong, but that is the conventional wisdom, and you see variations of that all over the place. Jeffrey Sachs, Richard Haas, Ray Dalio, all smart people, but that's fundamentally flawed. This is as good as it gets for China right now. They point to a number of reasons, and I can kind of go down the same list. I've done the same research. The water in China is poisoned. It's not just dirty. You got to clean it up before you can use it. It's poisoned. They don't have that much water to begin with, not enough for the size of the country. They've got a real estate collapse that makes what happened here in 2007. They've got massive defaults. And just to give you one example, in the U.S., when you buy a house, if you get a mortgage, the mortgage lender shows up at the closing, they give the seller the check, you sign the note, and they record it, and you've got a mortgage. In China, they have a mortgage system, but you take out the mortgage before the house is even built. And then you take the money and you give it to the developer and they use it to build the house. Well, guess what? The developers stole the money. They used it to cover other debts. The houses never got built, but you still have the mortgage. You signed the note, and the banks are trying to collect on mortgages from people who never got the houses. So the water's poisoned. Real estate sector, which is one of the biggest internal investment sectors, is collapsing. There's a dollar shortage. You see the reserves coming down, and they don't have the technological edge. Anything they've got, they stole from us or firms in Europe, Siemens or something like that. When I studied development economics in the 1970s, we thought that the hard part was to get from low income to middle income. But if you could do that, then it was a straight path to high income. You would just kind of keep going. Turns out that's not true. It's actually kind of easy to get from low income to middle income if you don't have too much corruption, which is you bring the population from the countryside to the city and you give them basically assembly type jobs. It's like, people say iPhones are made in China. Not really. They're assembled in China. Those parts come from 26 different countries. The semiconductors come from South Korea, but they assemble them in China. But that's kind of Lego style manufacturing. And you can get there. You can get to $10,000 per capita annual income. But getting from middle income to high income, that's really hard. And that requires technology and high value added production. And they can't get there. They are stuck in what is known as the middle income trap. But the biggest problem, well, bigger than everything I just mentioned, is they are facing, and it's here now, it's going to play out over a 55-year period, the greatest demographic collapse in history. Worse than the Black Death, worse than the 30 Years' War, worse than the Spanish flu of 1918. They're going to lose 600 million people in the next 50 or 60 years. Population is going to go from 1.4 billion to about 800 million. How do you maintain any kind of economy if you're going to lose 600 million people, which they are? And it's worse than that because they're losing them because their birth rate is so low. The magic number or the key number is 2.1. On average, 2 people have 2.1 kids. That'll keep your population constant. Birth rate in China right now, they say 1.7, but they always lie about their numbers. Other experts put it at kind of 1.2. Some people think it's 1. That is behind this demographic disaster. But the reason it's worse is that while you're not getting new births to replace the population, the existing population is getting older. And hundreds of millions are moving into their 70s, 80s, and 90s. And then you need a large segment of the kind of what's called working age population, 25 to 54, as caregivers to the people in their 80s and 90s who are suffering dementia. Now, that's a very worthy occupation, but it does not lend itself to productivity gains. There's been no increase in productivity in giving someone a bath in 5,000 years. I mean, maybe, 1870, indoor plumbing and hot water. Nice going. But that's it. So you're taking productive people, putting them as caregivers, which does not lend itself to productivity increases. A large segment of your population is not productive at all. So the portion that's left who are actually productive working age people doing productive things keeps getting smaller. Some scholars estimate that that's actually inflationary because you're going to need to pay them more. And we did see this after the Black Death in the late 14th century, early 15th century. Returns to labor went up. Wages went up because there weren't enough workers. But it was a very good period for labor because a third of the European population was dead.